for radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination. That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. This is my twice-a-week show in which we unpack a little bit of media bias as well as just some of the plain old politics that are being played with you and I as supposedly loyal subjects who will do as we're told and believe what we're told. But I'm here to encourage you, think a little bit deeper, question things at every level. And I'm going to give you a good example as to why that is. Today's episode is themed Truth and Consequences. Meaning when the truth comes out, sometimes there are consequences. And I got to thank the Eric Andre Show for providing us this wonderful meme. Senate Pro Tem President Chuck Winder has taken aim at two other senators who are part of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. And wow, has he lambasted them about why this is a terrible broach of Senate decorum. Yeah. So here's how the Statesman portrays it. And I think you'll appreciate that they get right to the point. Degrading and disrespectful, Boise Republican rebukes Freedom Caucus lawmakers. Now, he criticizes them. He actually removed some from I know that at least one of them was removed from a committee assignment, but you have to start asking the question, okay, what was it that they did? What did Senator Glenita, sorry, Glenita, I'm going to butcher your last name here, Zudavir? I hope I'm saying that correctly, as well as Scott Herndon. What exactly did they do that angered Chuck Winder so much? Well, let's look at the Statesman article. We'll get the spin first, and then we'll actually see what happened. In his letter to Senator Glenita Zuderveld, sorry, now I'll get it right. Winder said he would remove the Magic Valley senator from her post as vice chair of the Health and Welfare Committee for posting cartoons and blogs lambasting other state lawmakers for their ties to corporations and stances on immigration. Now, you have to understand what she was sharing was a meme showing rhinos lining up with Ayaki. And here's the bigger question. Is what she showed, is it a truthful representation of what's happening with many legislators? Because if the answer is yes, then maybe Chuck Winder is hollering for good reason. Maybe there's something he doesn't want getting out there. Senator Scott Herndon of Sagal also received a letter after he posted online criticisms of federal and state spending, saying that he thinks legislators do not sufficiently scrutinize the billions of dollars spent by the state every year. So these are the reasons why two disciplinary letters were sent from Senator Chuck Winder, who's President Pro Tem of the Senate, to Glenita as well as to Scott Herndon. Now, the leader of the Idaho Senate chastised two Republican members for making disparaging comments about colleagues in what has become a public spat 2 months before the Idaho legislature is set to convene. I'm going to question the way that they're portraying, well, it's a public spat and disparaging comments. That makes it sound like they were just making up stuff. If they were being factual in their criticism, or if they were calling into question actions or lack of principle on the part of certain legislators, okay, that's fair game. If you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in, the so-called public service arena. The Idaho Freedom Caucus on Monday published two letters Senate President Pro Tem Chuck Winder of Boise sent last week rebuking two state senators for criticisms they made about other legislators online. Now, again, this is being spun to try to show that somehow, they were, I guess, being extreme, and in whatever way they were saying unkind things about their colleagues. But maybe, just maybe, there was reason for their colleagues to be called out. Okay, one last note here from the Statesman. Now, in response to the letters sent out by Chuck Winder, Senator Herndon asserts this is a direct attack by one senator to erode our ability to serve the people of Idaho who elected us. Our duty is to inform and give voice to the people of our district, not to amplify the views of Senator Winder. His hostile comments, which are factually inaccurate, but dutifully carried by the news media, are degrading and disparaging. Senator Zuderfeld reinforced this, stating, regardless of what actions the leadership takes, I do not work for them. I work for the people. I will not allow intimidation to silence me. This brings up a very good point, and it's something that I think we probably should be applying to pretty much every legislative question, every public policy question that comes up. Who is the sponsor of this policy working for? In other words, are they seeking to expand the power of the state, the costs of the state's influence over your life, your obligations to the state? Or are they limiting the cost of the state? Are they restricting the state's powers to allow you to better make your own choices and protecting you from the power of the state? See, only one of those stances is actually working with the people. The other is actually working for the system, including those various, legislative activists or special interests or lobbyists that happen to be in line. Now, there were legislators who weighed in on this. Representative Heather Scott, who is no stranger to being criticized for being too principled, too extreme. She asked, what would Idaho rhinos do without the liberal press backing them up? And of course, this was leading right to the statesman's, degrading and disrespectful. Isn't this something? Now, the Idaho Freedom Caucus responded. This is what they said. This is their response to Senator Winder taking this out in public. In an alarming act of authoritarianism, pro tempore Senator Chuck Winder unilaterally stripped Senator Glenita Zuderveld from her position as vice chair of the Senate's Health and Welfare Committee. In addition, he issued condescending letters threatening Senator Scott Herndon and Glenita Zuderveld with ethics complaints if they continue to speak and write about the out-of-control state spending policies and special interest lobby group influences. Again, I'm coming back to the question, is anything that they said untrue? And if it is, then they need to correct that, but I don't think it is. I can't see anything on their part that was untrue when they rightly called out their colleagues for spending with abandon and not paying close enough attention to how they are getting into bed with lobbyists and basically serving the special interests over the people who actually elected them. So going back to the Idaho Freedom Caucus press release, Winder's letters came in response to recent newsletters from Senators Herndon and Zuderveld, both members of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. The two critically examined Idaho's significant spending increases and reliance on out-of-control federal debt spending. Okay, there's nothing untrue about that. There's a lot of that going on. They also shed light on voting patterns within the Senate. The Idaho Freedom Caucus views Senator Winder's retaliatory measures as a top-down coercive effort to impose conformity and groupthink in the Idaho Senate. Our Republic was designed as a bottom-up representative system of governing, and there's links in here to the various newsletters of Senator Herndon as well as Senator Zuderfeld's Substack. Now, again, they were doing this from the standpoint of we are calling into question certain actions on the part of our colleagues. This is not the same thing as saying, well, I'm running against this politician and I think they're a bad person because of this. This is calling people out for failure to live up to the lofty conservative standards that they espoused during the election cycle. But then somehow they conveniently seem to forget once they're actually elected and safely in office. Now, I can only speak for myself. Maybe there's a good reason that these lawmakers have to speak out. And it's not like this is not like, oh, we're blowing the lid off a huge scandal. There's a division in the Republican Party. Of course there is. And it's not just happening here in Idaho. In fact, let me show you a couple quick notes. This is from the Daily Wire, a headline from them from September 7th of this year. Dem lawmakers vote for leftism in lockstep. It's true. They really stick together. While Republicans routinely abandon conservatism, according to analysis. Now, there was a pretty intense study that was done, and it showed among the 10 least conservative states, when it comes to how Republican lawmakers actually vote, you will find Mississippi, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Idaho. Okay, this is a problem we've identified many, many times. They'll talk the talk, but they will not walk the walk. And when someone tries to insist, hey, you need to live up to the lofty ideals that you're espousing out there on the campaign trail. Oh, no, we can't do that. You're breaching decorum here. You're destroying our decorum. We're going to have to punish you. Or so says Chuck Winder. Republicans run on conservative promises, but after they're elected, they abandon the tough votes on key conservative policies when compared to Democrats, whose first rule is to stick together. So their analysis showed that moderate Republicans broke apart on key issues like parental choice in education. I think we saw that last session in Idaho, securing strong voter ID, or even putting a stop to COVID mandates. Now, these are some of the specific things that Idaho legislators and leadership was called out on. in the newsletters released by Senator Zuderveld as well as Senator Herndon. Isn't it interesting? It's almost like this study, though, just documented this mismatch between the desires of the populace and how their state representatives acted. And this is in states with the most liberal Republican lawmakers, which includes Idaho. Now, you're being told, well, rhino is just a bad word and it's just a way to spread, bad feelings and bad information. But if they're acting like a rhino or acting like a Republican, just, to have access to power, but not actually, upholding what are traditionally considered Republican ideals or the Republican Party platform, yeah, I would say we probably have a problem here. Maybe it's time we take a little bit deeper look. So, moving on. It's a real problem, and it's one of the reasons why you're seeing such desperation, and we'll see an incredible full court press to bring the open primaries initiative to fruition next year. Now, this is actually an opinion piece from 3 Republican leaders in eastern Idaho. Hiram Erickson, who's on the Madison County Republican Central Committee, also Randy Sutton, and Eric Erickson. If you're concerned about rhinos in the Republican Party, support the open primaries initiative. Listen to this. Again, these are Republicans that are trying to make the case here. While our party should be a big tent party, they say the closed primary has made it larger than it would be otherwise. Some of its members don't even want to be in the club. They just want to vote. And the Republican primary is often the only election available. The open primaries initiative, they say, solves this problem. If it passes, no one who wants to be a Democrat, constitutionalist, libertarian, or independent will have any incentive to register as a Republican. They can join whatever party they prefer or no party at all and still vote in both primaries and general elections. Those of us who remain as Republicans can stay and determine how to run our party without the participation of those who prefer to be elsewhere. Here's the problem. It's not about letting people go wherever they want to go and their vote, wherever they want. This is about turning the Republican Party into the uniparty. This is about transforming the Republican Party into a vapor, a shadow, something that lacks substance, that couldn't possibly stand for anything because it's been dumbed down and watered down to the point that it's essentially meaningless, meaning that Democrats and independents can win just like any Republican. Okay, there's a problem with this. It's not a matter of, well, this will solve the problem of people who want to vote but can't. They can go start their own party. But what they're lacking is organization. And the people who have the organization and right now have the political power and momentum, this is what this ranked choice voting and open primaries is trying to take away from them. If the open primaries initiative would get rhinos out of the party, these 3 Republicans ask, why is the current state leadership opposing it? Some in leadership are less focused on the long-term health of the party, I'm not sure what that means, and state, and more focused on the short-term goal of getting candidates that agree with them elected. Now, that's not entirely untrue. They are trying to get candidates that agree with them to get elected, but they're also trying to get candidates that agree with them and live up to the standards and live up to the principles that they say they're going to, as opposed to simply putting on a dog and pony show and then doing, whatever they damn well please once they're in power. Now, these guys claim that'll be easier, or it's easier to elect candidates who will toe the line with a closed Republican primary, even with some rhinos participating. It is more difficult for party leaders to get their candidates elected if every Idahoan can vote. In other words, if every vote can be used within their own primary to water down their vote. So they don't want to give up that advantage. But even if it harms the state and our party, how is it harming the state? How is it harming the party? People are still free to cast their votes. They're just not free to dictate to other people, how your vote shouldn't count. Josh White, I think, has a great explanation on this. He says, here we go again. Another so-called Republican legal eagle preaching surrender of our greatest weapon against authoritarian overreach, as well as deposing tyranny and despotism. The inviolable right to assemble and directly address our grievances to the government. Okay, this is why, as a private organization, that's what the Republican Party is doing. This is part about that right of association. Somebody doesn't like it. Well, I have too much of an advantage, which translated means my ideas won't carry the day and I can't get people to vote for me. Boo-hoo, somebody do something and stop them. Anyway, as he explains here, it's like offering up the keys to your house and then wondering why you got robbed. Open primaries might sound good to folks who don't see the long game. Sure, they say it's about inclusivity, but what's so inclusive about letting folks who don't share your core values decide your future? Pick your team, your starting team. It's not just about voting. It's about the right to rally under a banner and choose the champions who will fight for your cause without interference from those who may very well wish to see your cause fail. That's pretty straight talk. And this isn't just about internal party squabbles, okay? This isn't just a spat that spilled over into public. This is about safeguarding the very mechanisms we rely on to maintain a republic grounded in its principles. I like that they use the word principles here, or that he uses the word principles here, this tweet. If those mechanisms are compromised by those who don't share the party's ideals, you don't just risk a few rhinos. You risk the entire platform being shifted without a true consensus from those it's supposed to represent. It's a good point. That's not hyperbole. That's a constitutional crisis and a concern that warrants a serious pushback, not a byline in an op-ed. Okay, it's well put. Now, Josh also hears from another poster who says, well, let's call it what it is. This is ranked choice voting. It's a dangerous road that's hard to come back from. And Josh says, well, they actually want these two things coupled together. So it's even more malicious. Open primaries give Democrats the ability to decide who their opposition is, while ranked choice voting further muddies the waters, allowing for manipulation of outcomes through a convoluted, less transparent process. RCV is purposely confusing and complex so that only a handful of people are in the know. It's true. I mean, you could cast your vote. Here's my 3 ranked top ranked choices, and none of your votes count, but all of your votes go toward electing somebody else. Does that seem right? He says this is similar to what we see down in Arizona, where even the most egregious and sinister tactics are brushed off as part of the process. It's like handing over the playbook to your opponent before the game and letting them choose your starting lineup and replacing your quarterback with the hot dog vendor. It's not just misguided, it's strategically unsound and a potential recipe for undermining the very framework of fair competition that our electoral system is supposed to uphold. This isn't just a step in the wrong direction. It's a leap into an abyss where the voice of the true party faithful could be drowned out by the strategic machinations of those with opposing interests. That was a beautiful explanation. So it's about truth and consequences. And right now we are seeing some legislators who are speaking truth, which apparently is resulting in consequences from some of those above them in the power structure. Before you jump on the bandwagon and start, gathering stones for Senator Hyde or Senator Zutefeld, think about who is actually standing for principle, who is actually trying to keep government within its proper role, which is to keep you free, not to tie your shoes or powder your nose or do anything else for you. Who's on your side? I can tell you this, it's not the people who are clamoring for a system that is so cloudy and so nebulous that nobody really knows what it stands for. Your voting really is just a reassurance ritual you go through every couple of years, and it's to make you feel like, wow, I'm in control here, but you're not. So the people who want to keep government limited, the people who want to faithfully serve as in public servants, are the ones who are getting hung out to dry here. Are you starting to see the problem? Starting to see why? And the press, not surprisingly, is 100% on the side of those who would further like to muddy the waters and maybe take the system for a ride while they're at it. You're going to be hearing a lot over the next year about open primaries, ranked choice voting, the problem with these extremists in the legislature, and they're targeting these individuals who actually are the most principled. I guess I would take it as a compliment, but it's probably still not very pleasant. Nonetheless, do what you can to support those who stand on principle. For those who just simply engage in rhetoric and politicians, there's a lot of them that are happy to do that. Just know, you can't trust them. The ones you can trust are the ones who are willing to stand on principle, even when it's inconvenient, even when sometimes it comes back to bite them or hurt them. Maybe think about that if you're trying to consider, where exactly should I put my support? I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination? That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.